This week in Idaho, an Idaho company helps out with the hurricanes in the southeast of America that we've been hearing about a ton. Both pro and anti-Israel protesters remember October 7th, which was this last week, and it's crazy how quickly that has come back around. And then Coeur d'Alene will be getting a Mormon Temple. That and so much more in this week of the local Yocal Idaho Midweek Report, where we give you a quick overview of the news in Idaho for the last week. And starting off with that first story we teased, Idaho Falls-based Melaleuca is stepping up to aid victims of Hurricane Helene, and the other one that has just hit recently, in the southeastern part of the United States. The company is providing packaged goods containing food, including River Brand Ranch Black Label beef, hygiene kits, and other essential items for those that aren't able to get them there. The hardest hit areas is over there in Tennessee, North Carolina, and Georgia, and Florida, specifically facing kind of some of the logistical issues that are happening over there. Melaleuca is using some creative methods to get these supplies to them, including helicopters, ATVs, and even kayaks, which Godspeed to those people doing that. The Melaleuca Foundation is also making some significant cash donations to local food banks, in particular, including a surprise $25,000 contribution to the Tampa Bay area over there. They're also working with local organizations and community partners. Melaleuca is continuing to assess and respond to the needs of those kind of affected in that area, because it seems to be an ongoing one. A company spokesperson, Tony Lima, expressed gratitude for the opportunity to provide relief and hope to the impacted communities over there, emphasizing Melaleuca's commitment to emphasizing lives during times of crisis. Speaking of a crisis that happened last year, and we're remembering now again, on the one-year anniversary of the October 7th attack that happened in Israel, this last week in Boise, there were gatherings representing both sides of the Israel-Palestine conflict that continues to rage on. Supporters of Israel convened at the Egyptian Theater to pay tribute to those who lost their lives in the attack, emphasizing remembrance and solidarity. Rabbi Mendel Lifshitz of Chabad, the Jewish center, spoke about commemorating the victims and honoring those who have been fighting for Israel. But concurrently, on the other side of the aisle, members of the Boise to Palestine held a vigil at the Idaho State Capitol, calling for changes in state policy regarding the conflict. The event definitely kind of highlighted the ongoing global impact of the conflict, even as far as here in Idaho. We often feel like we're a little isolated. While both groups expressed their respective viewpoints, the gathering underscores the complex nature of the situation, especially since it's been going on since all of recorded history, and its far-reaching effects worldwide, even as far as Idaho. And speaking of far and reaching, the LDS Church has announced plans for 17 new temples worldwide, including one in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. This will be the church's 10th temple in Idaho and the first in the northern part of the state, so they're going north for the winter. While the exact location is yet to be determined, it will be in one of the three locations, either in Post Falls, Hayden Lake, or Coeur d'Alene. The local church leaders have expressed excitement, citing increased accessibility for members who currently have to travel hours to Spokane, Washington's temple over there. The announcement is also part of an unprecedented temple building initiative under President Russell M. Nelson, who has announced 185 temples since 2018. Man, they're booking it. The expansion does show the LDS growth and its commitment to its members. It's worth noting there have been some reservations and concerns from Christians up there in Coeur d'Alene about the news. In closing, the LDS Church claims over about 475,000 members here in Idaho, though the exact number of members is a bit unclear there. But like most churches, they're not keeping a super tight check on that. If you've liked the Midweek Report so far, please do us a favor and hit the like button on YouTube, Rumble, or Twitter. It helps us reach more folks who love Idaho just like you. Speaking of wonderful Idaho experiments, the Valley View School District in Nampa, if you'll remember, implemented a ban on smartphones and smart devices for the 2024 to 2025 school year. And it looks like initial reports about it seem to be overwhelmingly positive. Superintendent Joey Palmer reports about 80% of parents support the decision, which is good whenever you can get the parents behind a thing. The ban extends beyond phones to include smartwatches and AirPods, with exceptions if you're worried for health-related devices like glucose monitors. However, with that said, teachers noted increased classroom engagement and improved academic performances. Now, if you're worried about students not being able to capture life, they are adapting creatively and using digital cameras to capture memories there at school, so you don't need to worry about that aspect being lost. Overall, the school has reported better focus during group projects and increased social interaction, which, shocker, you take the distracting thing away, you have to interact. Principal Gwynn has stated that he's observed higher classroom participation and can also agree with the teachers that it seems to be creating better grades. In conclusion, the policy seems to be having some wonderful effects on the school environment there, encouraging a more social environment there at school, which is always great, and reducing distraction because you're not looking at your phone all the time. This initiative in Nampa schools does demonstrate how limiting digital devices can have a positive impact on the educational environment. It will be very interesting to see as it goes throughout the year how it affects the overall grades at the end of the semester. Speaking of educational and fun things, Idaho residents were treated to a rare spectacle of northern lights last week as an unusually strong solar storm hit the Earth. This geomagnetic storm, caused by coronal mass injections from the sun, those things that doomsayers get a little scared about, pushed the Aurora Borealis further south than normal. If you're wondering why we're getting it this far south, the phenomenon occurs when charged particles from solar winds interact with the Earth's atmosphere, creating some really vibrant displays of pinks, purples, greens, and blue light, which is just really mesmerizing to look at. This recent event in particular is part of the sun's 11-year solar cycle, currently near its peak, known as the solar maximum. Super cool stuff if you want to go research that more. While beautiful, these storms can potentially disrupt power and communications because they're electromagnetic, so they have some effects there. Though with this specific one, no significant issues were reported, which is good to hear. For those hoping to witness further displays in the future, experts recommend viewing away from city lights because they can pollute a little bit and make it hard to see, ideally around midnight during spring or the fall equinox, which we're going into here shortly. Speaking of things up in the north, recent allegations that we've talked about questioning Idaho State Senator Phil Hart's residency have been proven false. If you don't remember, North Idaho Democrats held a press conference on October 1st, claiming that Hart didn't live at his Kellogg address. They based this theory on the state of his residency and how it seems to be under construction, which the answer to this is going to be funny, make you chuckle. Hart is a structural engineer and explained that the work being done on his house is remodeling. What man do you not know that continually remodels almost all the time if they can? And is part of his hobby and professional development where he gets practice a little bit. A complaint filed by the Democrat activists Dora Rose and Evan Coe with the Secretary of State's office, however, also lacked verifying evidence and proper legal basis. On October 5th, the Secretary of State's office concluded that resident Hart met the residency requirement for Legislative District 2, effectively really dismissing any of the allegations and validating Hart's status as a resident representative for that area, which the answer to that just made me chuckle so much when I read it there. Speaking of something that you won't be chuckling about, but excited/sad of why it's the case, the Cascade Range District in Idaho is offering free fuel wood permits starting October 11th through November 30th, weather permitting, of course, because it can get a little bit snowy up there. The district ranger, Chris Bentley, announced that residents can collect up to 10 cords of wood per permit. Specifically, the initiative comes in response to the challenging fire season that has limited access to popular fieldwood gathering locations up there, particularly that the fieldwood will include dead snags, downed trees, and wood piles from fire mitigation efforts. And those specific piles will be along backcountry roads for easy access. The permits, if you're wanting to grab one, are available at the Cascade Ranger District office, along with a pamphlet detailing collection rules so you make sure you're all legal and above board. The program aims to help locals heat their homes this winter while addressing the post-fire recovery needs in those areas. Bentley advised participants as wood piles may take a couple of weeks to appear and remind collectors to bring proper safety equipment so you're collecting it in such a way that you won't hurt yourself. Speaking of the forests and wildfires, the Idaho Transportation Department's avalanche team is gearing up for winter over there in Lowman, focusing on the safety along Highway 21 following the Wapita fire that burned so much area up there. Team leader Bill Nicholson reports that while the fire's long-term impacts on avalanche risk remain uncertain because that area hasn't had it in a bit, immediate repairs have been made to the damaged guardrails so people can be safe while traveling along that way. Starting November 1st, though, the team will conduct daily monitoring, including snow measurements and stress tests, to try to keep on top of any avalanche risk in the area. Something important to note is this stretch of Highway 21 is one of only 3 U.S. highways designated as a high avalanche area. The team has also conducted some aerial assessments since the fire and is preparing to use remote control snow blasters to trigger controlled avalanches when necessary if the snow gets a little heavy there and they have to blow it off. Nicholas does emphasize that their goal is to provide 8-hour notice for road closure, so if you're traveling that way, you can be ahead of it there. The takeaway for you motorists out there that might be traveling that way over to Stanley is that stopping along the highway section is prohibited during the winter months for safety reasons so that things can just move through there. So keep up on the reports and be prepared if you regularly travel that route. If you know some people that live over there in Stanley or some other story that we've talked about on this episode, please don't hesitate to share it. Your shares helps us spread the word about our beautiful state and help Idahoans stay informed about what's going on in it. Speaking about being informed and staying up in the mountains, the legal battle between former Community Library Network trustee and members of the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee, my goodness, that is a long phrase to say, has concluded. Judy Meyer and Reagan McCree, who filed a defamation lawsuit in May of 2023 seeking damages over $10,000, has reached a confidential settlement with the defendants, the suit, which alleged the distribution of defamatory letters during their re-election campaign, will be dismissed, avoiding a scheduled November jury trial. While details remain undisclosed on this, McCree described the resolution as amicable, so that's good to hear. The former trustees expressed relief at closing this chapter. However, there's that key word there, they remain concerned about the broader political climate affecting libraries in Kootenai County. Since the election, the library network has seen some significant changes, I would argue one of them in a positive way, including breaking ties with the American Library Association, which seems to be a little bit more left-leaning times, and facing some staff layoffs over there due to some budgetary constraints, which maybe they weren't needed to be that big in the beginning. The settlement, though, does mark an end to a contentious period over there for local libraries in Kootenai County. Speaking of a topic that is contentious not only here in Idaho but nationally, U.S. Senator Jim Risch has presented Idaho Representative Barbara Ehardt with a golden letter, and ask why, to recognize her efforts in protecting women's sports and defending Title IX. Specifically, Ehardt, who has co-sponsored the Fairness in Women's Sports Act in 2020, which got signed as we remember talking about on this. You can go check that back in previous midweek reports, has been a vocal advocate against the Biden administration's redefinition of Title IX. The word comes amid a recent controversy, which we also talked about, in collegiate sports, including Boise State University's volleyball team forfeiting a match against a team with a transgender athlete. Ehardt emphasized the importance of preserving opportunities for female athletes based on biological sex. She criticized particularly the changes to Title IX that the Biden administration has, which now prohibits discrimination based on gender identity. A little bit of a stretch there, because it's supposed to be for women. They argue these changes could negatively impact women's sports, which I think we have already seen that. The recognition highlights the ongoing fight against transgenderism in women's sports and the interpretation of Title IX by the Biden administration and how local areas are getting involved to push back and implement the more traditional definition. Speaking of education, and don't worry, you're not listening to last week's episode, Caldwell High School in Idaho has experienced a brief lockdown Thursday morning, October 10th, after reports of a handgun on campus. The students alerted the administration about it, which led to this action. The Caldwell police confirmed an unloaded handgun was found, and the suspect is in custody. The school quickly transitioned from the lockdown to a hall check before returning to normal operations after everything was made sure to be fine there. The Caldwell School District, which recently replaced school resource officers with a private security due to budget cuts, which we also talked about on previous midweek reports, emphasized its commitment to student safety, saying that the budget cuts and the security they have are plenty adequate to handle stuff like this and have handled it well. This event does highlight the ongoing concerns about school security in Idaho, especially after the handgun that was found at school there in Boise and the homecoming that was canceled here in Caldwell, but also coming shortly after the district's board meeting to address parent safety concerns and other cases, as I just said, here in the Valley. Speaking of something that raised a little bit of concerns, but it's nothing to worry about, a small earthquake was reported in northern Idaho's Bonner Ferry on Monday, October 7th of last week. The U.S. Geological Survey recorded a magnitude 2.7 tremor at 8:15 a.m., approximately about 14 miles south of Bonner's Ferry. While the earthquake of this magnitude may be felt, so you'll feel a little stuff shaking there, they typically don't cause any huge damage, just light, if anything, that does happen there. But specifically, the impact of such a seismic event can vary based on factors like the distance from the epicenter. If you're right on it, it'll be different. The soil type in the area, if it's more soil-based or rocky, and the construction of the building that you may be in when it gets hit. But significant damages usually only occur with earthquakes above a magnitude 4 or 5, so 2.7 is very safe. The event is part of Idaho's ongoing seismic activity, which, if you're news to the state, since 1994, the state has experienced over 2,000 earthquakes greater than a magnitude 1. A little bit of small ones, a little bit of big ones. There hasn't been a huge amount. This minor quake does serve as a reminder, however, of Idaho's geological activity. If you haven't seen the sawtooth already, that's a hint in and of itself, though it posed no significant risk to residents or infrastructure in the area over there. Which, if you've made it to this point in the midweek report, you must love learning about Idaho, so please make sure to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss any of our future content about Idaho. Coming towards the end of the episode, the Latah County Jail in Moscow, Idaho, also up north, has failed a recent state fire inspection, highlighting some issues with the 51-year-old facility. Chief Deputy Tim Best reported that the jail failed to meet current Idaho jail standards, particularly in the area in its fire egress. But for some broader context, the aging facility, which is located beneath the county courthouse, has faced some numerous problems, including sewer and plumbing issues, not on top of this new inspection. One major concern is the width of the cell doors, is the main issue of this inspection, with only one meeting the current code requirements for the fire egress. Upgrading these doors would cost up to $100,000 each. The court is now facing a difficult decision in wanting to invest the repair costs, considering to build a new jail, which would cost an estimated $30 to $40 million for the county. But moving forward, the situation does reflect the issues affecting smaller jails across Idaho, where there is more limited funding and not as many options available to them. The county is exploring some temporary solutions, including housing inmates elsewhere as they're working on it or different things. They're also weighing their long-term options before they make some final decisions there. Keeping with the theme of criminals, a 44-year-old cold case in Ada County has finally been closed. Mary Tracy, a 24-year-old mother from Boise, was found stabbed to death along Highway 55 in June of 1980. But recent DNA analysis, which is pretty cool stuff, has linked the crime to Charles Strain, a convicted murderer who died in 2007. Strain, with a criminal history in the Pacific Northwest, was living in Garden City at the time of Tracy's murder. The case was reopened in 2023 at the request of Tracy's daughter, so you don't have to worry about that they're trying to dig up old bones. While the case is officially resolved due to his death, the Ada County Sheriff's Office is seeking information about Tracy's final days and potential witnesses, particularly for the purposes of resolution for the family and to just have a better understanding of the picture. This resolution does overall bring closure to a long-standing mystery and demonstrates the power of perseverance and the advancements in forensic technology, specifically in the DNA part, to solve cold cases that otherwise we weren't able to figure out. Speaking of ambitious things, but this one didn't get off the ground, an ambitious project to revamp the area around downtown Boise's YMCA is facing some significant significant challenges. Specifically, the initial proposal in 2021 as a comprehensive redevelopment of the 2.5 city blocks. The project has been scaled back due to rising construction costs, inflation, and changing market conditions, which we've all heard that a ton. While the new YMCA building is still on track for the November construction, other elements are a little bit more in flux there. The YMCA is now considering selling some of its properties on the open market, properties that were initially part of the larger development vision. A planned parking garage with senior apartments has been reduced to just a garage with a ground level area for retail, and an affordable housing building's fate remains uncertain in the whole thing. But the CCDC, Idaho's Urban Renewal Agency, is facing a little bit of a tight timeline on all this because of a deadline with its West Side District expiring on September of 2026, which for all of us doesn't seem like a lot of time, but for construction, that's a very tight window. Despite these challenges, officials remain committed to building the new YMCA, though the broader vision for the area's redevelopment appears increasingly uncertain as the deadline gets a bit closer there and funding gets a little bit tighter. Speaking of something that isn't uncertain, the closing of this episode. Thank you for listening to the entire report. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If you like the Midweek Report, please make sure to check out the rest of our content. We're constantly working away at it, and we'll have some fun interviews coming up here shortly. Also, if we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email or on Twitter by tweeting us at local Yocal Idaho. With the small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. That's all for now. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Godspeed.